Greetings and welcome to Parsing John. We have finished our first section of our Greek and Latin, and today we get to move on and start the second paragraph, if you will, of the Latin Vulgate. This time we're going to be going through verse 6 through, it's either verse 12 or 13. I'm pretty sure it's 13. Clearly we didn't have enough room to put it all onto one piece of paper, so the rest of it, 11 through 13, is going to be on a separate piece of paper. Today we're only going to get through verses 6 and 7, so we'll be stopping right there. Next video is going to be 8 and 9, and then 10 is going to get its own video, and then in all likelihood we're going to have to take 11 and the first half of 12 in the video after that, considering how long those three remaining verses are. Okay, I've got our rubric right here. You should take a moment to refresh your memory on all of that. I'm going to put it up in our corner over here. And very first thing we want to do is read our Latin aloud. I'm only going to be going through the end of 7 today. Fuit homo missus a Deo cui nomen erat Johannes, hic venit in testimonium ut testimonium prohiberet de lumine ut omnes crederent per illum. Okay, and the very first thing we want to do whenever we're translating from Latin into English is we want to find our verb. And et, in this case, is the very first word in our sentence. Fuit, since it's got the it ending, we know that it's going to be a third person and singular verb. This one comes from our verb of being, sum esse fui. And since fu is the stem, we know that it is a perfect tense verb. And it's going to be, normally we call this thing active, even though since it's a verb of being, it doesn't really fall into those categories. So active and indicative, and it means either the subject has been or the subject was. We're going to go with the easier of the two and just say was. Okay, now we want to find our subject. Our subject has to be a singular noun. We look right next to it. We've got homo. Homo is a third declension noun, so its nominative form does end in the letter O, like the name Dido or Kikaro, sorry. Messed that up. So this is nominative, and it is singular, and it is masculine, and it means man or mankind. Okay, so a man was, or just man was. Moving on from there, we see that we have missus. Missus ends in a us, which means it is nominative, singular, and masculine as well. But this thing is a participle. It's got the stem mis, which is the stem of the fourth principal part of mito, mittere, misi, misum. So this one, because it's the fourth principal part, it is acting as an adjective modifying man. We know it is the perfect passive participle. Perfect passive part. And it means having been sent, or in the shorter form, just plain old sent. Normally when I start out with perfect passive participles, I will write the abbreviation having been right there, but ultimately in a final translation I'll usually remove that. It's not, it doesn't really help the English. It can actually make it harder for a common American to understand. However, if you are just beginning to learn participles in Latin, you should always include the full thing, having been sent, in your translation. It's good practice to remind yourself what this thing is, what its actual sense is, rather than going to the straight abbreviated form. Okay, so moving on. Then we have a prepositional phrase starting with our preposition a. And a always wants to have the ablative. And we see that deo right here is in the ablative, and it is singular, masculine. Looking ahead, we get cui. Cui here is a relative pronoun. So it can't be modifying that. It's also in the dative, I think. Yeah. So our prepositional phrase ends right there. We don't need to go any further. We've got a full sentence with these two words, so we can go ahead and work on our prepositional phrase right there. And a plus the ablative means from or by. Since we have a participle right here, we know that the ablative of agent is the specific construction we have here. So I can put above agent. We're Barely got any room. I'm writing a little bit too big today. By God. Okay. Now we can move on to this relative clause. Qui nomen. Qui, as I said, is going to be dative, and it is singular. And we have to figure out what is the antecedent of kui. Well, it's not going to be God. That wouldn't make much sense. Instead, it goes all the way back to homo. So it's going to be masculine. So with kui, we can never tell the gender except from its antecedent, as kui is the same for masculine, feminine, and neuter. Right. So we would say, to whom. Okay, to whom what? Well, now we need to go find our verb. And our verb is erat here. We've seen this one many, many times before. Now we know it is a third person singular, and it is imperfect. Gosh, making plenty of mistakes today. And it is active and indicative. Almost slipped out of the screen there, sorry. Meaning was. Not to be confused with the meaning of this one. This is a perfect tense was. Again, the other option is has been here. Okay, what was? Well, we need a singular subject. We look right before that. We got nomen, which is a neuter word. Go ahead and write that in, which means en could either be nominative or accusative singular. We don't need an accusative. This verb and that verb, there's the same verb, technically, just in different tenses. Neither of them can take a direct object. So nominative is the most logical answer for this one. Nominative and singular as our subject. To whom name was. Name was a predicate. So Johannes is going to be a nominative singular. And it's going to look pretty weird in Latin since this is not a native Latin name. It actually comes from Hebrew. So they had to Latinize it, just as in the Greek they had to come up, at least as far as I'm aware, they had to come up with a special Greek form for it to actually work in the language. In Greek they used this ending right here, not going to have space anywhere, was actually eta sigma, which is the first declension masculine nominative singular ending, and it looks like in the Latin just transferred and done the same thing using the Greek ending with a long e. So nominative singular masculine. This is, as far as I've seen anyway, pretty common practice. Whenever you have a Greek nominative singular first declension, you just change it into es, and it's usually going to be a third declension in the Latin. Okay, and the meaning of that one is John. Okay, so there's our first verse. Okay, man was sent by God, to whom name was John. So this construction right here, since we've got a verb of being and a dative, is actually the dative of possession. Of possession. Abbreviate that. So if we wanted to make this sound a little bit more reasonable in English, we would actually say, whose name was John? But that's not the purpose of these videos, what we're doing here. We're still going to leave it in the kind of chunky form, and it still works just fine like that. Okay, moving on to verse number 7. We've got hic, which is a demonstrative, and this is going to be nominative, and it's going to be singular. And if you recall our forms of the demonstrative, we've got hic, masculine, hike, feminine, and then hoc for neuter. This is the one we have here, so nominative singular is confirmed, and masculine. What's the antecedent of this one? Well, it's going to be this man over here. And now, note this, it doesn't make sense for this to mean mankind, which it technically could. But in the context of our whole sentence and the preceding paragraph, well, the preceding paragraph doesn't help very much. But anyway, context tells us that this is not talking about mankind. Mankind was sent by God. Whose name was John? All of mankind was called John? Yeah, that doesn't really work. So, just plain old one man. So it's logical to stick in a definite article, a man, so that we don't make that confusion. All right, so this one, and as we've discussed before, when we come across a demonstrative like this, in Latin and Greek will frequently leave out the noun that this demonstrative is pointing to, but English does not like doing that. So we stick in, for these instances, usually the word one. This one, okay. Now we come to our verb. We've got it, so that's going to be a third person, and it's singular. And because this is a fourth conjugation verb, we can't tell if it is a present tense or a perfect tense. And usually whenever we have problems with that, it's best just to write down both options, present or perfect. And then context would tell us which is better. Based on our first sentence here, erat and fuit are both past tense, so perfect is the more likely option. But I'm still going to leave them both in there. Okay, and this is active, and it is indicative. Okay, prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrase in the right before ut. Okay, this would mean come or came. And came is going to be the more likely of the two, so that's the one that we're going to use in our final translation. All right, prepositional phrase, we can get to that now that we've got the main clause, the rest of the main clause done. And in here is clearly taking accusative because it's the object of the preposition ends in um, so I'm going to add plus acc. And this is going to be accusative, singular, and this word, testimony, that I usually indicates that it's going to be a neuter word, and I believe that is correct for this one, but you can go to any dictionary and check to make sure that I am correct. Okay, on this one, this word, we can use the English word testimony if we want to, but usually you want to stay away from cognates, usually. In this case, we're going to go with an alternate, and that would be witness, which looks really weird with that in right there. Go away in. Okay, still looks weird. Whatever. Okay, now normally, in would just mean into when it takes the accusative. And had we any other noun right here than witness, that would still work. This one came into a object of the preposition, but we have not a location, but we have a concept, a occupation, into a witness. That doesn't make sense. So to figure this one out, you actually have to dig pretty deep into the dictionary to figure out what exactly is going on. And this is a rare use of the preposition in. I believe it's been a while since I've looked at this. If you go to, if you have a copy of the short, and you go to the accusative section of the entry for in under letter C, that's where you can find the exact description of what's going on with this preposition. It doesn't reference this passage, it references other passages, but essentially what this in here means actually is for. It's uncommon, but it is a legitimate use of it. And specifically what's going on here is it's used to show relation aimed at the object of the preposition. So this one came in relation to witness. For a witness is what we would say in English. It sounds kind of weird, but it's the best we can do. Okay, moving on. We've got ut. Ut here is a kind of vexatious word in Latin. In order to figure out what ut is actually doing, we need to know what the verb in its clause is. If it is a indicative verb, then we would say as, just as, translate it something along those lines. But if it is a subjunctive verb, then what we've actually got going on is a purpose clause. So we take a look ahead, testimonium, that's a repeat of that one. We can actually pull all this over again. You got the um ending, so we know it's accusative again. And here we get perhiberet. And perhiberet is a third person, and it is singular. And it is going to be, because you got ere there, the infinitive of the verb, it is an imperfect, and it is active. We know active because it's got the T, and not ter, and it is subjunctive. Since we have a subjunctive here, we now know that ut is going to be introducing a purpose clause. So we can go ahead and write that up there. Purpose clause. And we would say in order that or to, depending on what the verb means. And this one has three basic options. We've got bring forward, hold, or cite. So we have the option of saying bring forward a witness, hold a witness, or cite a witness. I'm going to go with hold in order to hold witness. Okay. That completes this part of the purpose clause. We can move on. We've got a prepositional phrase here. We've got another oot, which means after that one we need to take a look, see if we got an indicative or subjunctive. We might have another purpose clause there, but in the meanwhile we can go back to de lumine and figure out what this prepositional phrase is. De is clearly taking the ablative with this third declension word, so we'd say plus EBL, and lumine is singular, and it is feminine. Now, in the previous paragraph, we had John talking about lux, as in light, and lux is normally meant to mean like light of the sun or of another heavenly body. But here we have a different version of the word for light, and this one can, just like lux, mean purely light. But its secondary meanings are source of light, light from a torch or a lamp, something along those lines. So we've got a slightly different sense here with this word than we did in the previous paragraph. So I'm going to say source of light. And now we just need to know, what does de mean? Now, de normally means down from, or at least that's what most textbooks tell you. However, in my experience, textbooks will tell you that and then only ever use it as its secondary meaning, and that would be about. Okay, so then we've got, in order to hold witness about the source of light. Okay, now we come to our second ut. Running ahead, we've got crederent, and that is our verb there. We've got another infinitive before ending in T, so that we know this is going to be another purpose clause. Just going to write perp there in order. Okay, and what is crederent? Well, int tells us that it is a third person and it is plural. Ere tells us that it is imperfect and subjunctive also. Since it's int and not inter, we know it's going to be active. Is that actually my abbreviation for subjunctive? Yes, it is. Good. And this word means believe. And in this case, because we have believe here, I'm going to insert the word that. And now we need to look for a new subject. Since this one is singular, it has the same subject as the main clause, hic, here. But now we have a plural one, so we want to look for a plural subject. Looking immediately before, which is the direction you always want to go first, if you have anything before it that isn't identified yet. We see that we've got es, which is either a nominative or a accusative plural form of our adjective. We don't need really an accusative, though it's nice to have an accusative, with a normal action verb. However, credo takes, I want to say, either the dative or the ablative as its object. So even if we had an accusative with this specific verb, it would not actually function properly. So this is going to be nominative, and it's plural, and we don't know the gender of the subject. It could be masculine or feminine. It certainly couldn't be neuter, since this is a I stem third declension neuter adjective, or sorry, third declension adjective. So it's most likely going to be masculine, because masculine is the default when you're talking about an indefinite, plural, or singular human thing. So I'm going to write in masculine as our default. And this one means, since we have plural, we're going to say all. All right. In order that all believe. Okay. And now we come to our final two words. Per is a preposition, and illum is its object. Since that ends the verse, we know that the prepositional phrase stops right there. Since illum ends in um, we know that per is taking the accusative. And this is going to be accusative singular, and it is going to be masculine. If it were feminine, it would be ilam. If it were neuter, it would be ilud, to match the nominative singular of ile, ila, ilud. And this, its antecedent, is going to refer back to either our initial subject, John, or the light. But since light is feminine and ilum is masculine, grammatically, if that's proper use of the word, this cannot refer to lumine. It has to go all the way back to John. And I don't really have room to send an arrow back to man. And this one would just say that. And again, since we have no noun that ilum is actually directly connected with, we're just going to have to insert the word one. Now, one way in English that helps us separate ilum from referring to lumine, as opposed to when it is in fact referring to John, is we've got this version of the demonstrative. If we in English, when we want to talk about two different objects and we want to separate the two, we will speak of the one that is nearer, either nearer in when we have referred to it last, or nearer in actually spatial relation to us. We use this or these. And when we want to talk about the further, either in the written word, so this is further away than lumine is, we use that or those. This would refer to the closer of the two, lumine. That would refer to the further of the two, John. We've got that in Latin, and this word is used the same way as our English word that. So since we have that in English, it should be relatively clear that it's referring to John and not the light. Okay, so we've gone through. The only thing we have left is per, and the meaning of per plus the accusative is through. And I think it could also, in rare instances, it could mean by. I want to say, I could be wrong there. All right, so we've got everything done. Going back to the beginning of our section, we read through our translation. We want to have our indefinite article there. Since we're not talking about mankind, we know there's a single man being spoken of here. A man was sent by God, to whom the name was John. This one came for witness, in order to hold witness about a source of light, or source of light. The source of light would probably make more sense. But we don't have any articles in Latin, so we're keeping them out mostly of our translation, in order that all believe through that one. And there is our translation. It's kind of hard to follow since it's not very polished. We haven't converted into proper English. You could go ahead and do that. Wouldn't be too difficult, and most of this throwing articles in would clear up a lot of what's going on. But this is quite sufficient for what we wanted to do. I hope going through this has been helpful for you, and I hope you join me in the next Latin video when we tackle verses 8 and 9. You could also, if you are interested in it, learning Greek, or you have studied Greek, you could check out the other, the videos alongside this one that go through the Greek text. We actually do the Greek before we come across the Latin. So we've already got the video for the Greek version of verses 6 and 7 up. Okay, well, see you next time, and have a good day.